Wired Access.
We'll do it live.
Wired Access.
Do it live.
Wired Access.
We'll do it live.
Wired Access.
Welcome to Wired Access Podcast, where I'm your host, DJ K-Dub Omaha. We're a part of the Hurrdat Sports production. So on today's episode, we have a guy who I've seen along with a lot of our Hurrdat Sports video photographers and photographers at the Supernovas who have won the championship. And man, did I wish I was there. But also the owner of Axcess Photography, Bill Matthews. Bill Matthews. What do they call you when you're live there? I only ask because, like, I'm thinking, dude's got two first names. Do they call him Bills? Do they call him Matt?
You know, I've heard Matt. I've heard just Bills. A lot of the athletes at Bellevue University that I shoot for, they just call me Aspects.
It's just, you know, when you got the name where it's Matthew and Bill, it's like, man, what can we give him for the nickname? What did you grow up with?
Bills.
Yeah,
people
okay,
just
yeah,
call
it's
me
just
Bills all the
easy.
time,
What up, Bills?
Yeah.
Dude, you've been a part of something so awesome in the growth of photography, right? Between covering multi-sports, between covering real estate. The picture that you create is endless and that you can create. But the Supernovas was one of the main reasons that it brought you on. They've been one of our sponsors of our show and many shows, just because it's a beginning of something bigger than we would have ever expected.
Oh, yeah.
And then they get to the championship and win it here in town. And you were luckily enough to be one of the guys there, as well as our team. And gosh, I wish I could have, but schedule just didn't work out for me. But it's amazing to see just the growth in such a short time, but also just to see the interactions of the players, the fans, and you're capturing every moment differently at every different time of going, man, and seeing the smiles, the happiness, what it can bring to an atmosphere. Bill, how long have you been doing this photography, for one?
Yeah.
Two, what does it mean to be a part of something that you've been going through? I mean, I think this last year probably has to be one of the limelights.
Yeah. Well, I've been doing photography for 11, 12 years, but doing it full time. As you know, my job has been the last 5 years or so. And yeah, I operate two different brands. One is called Get It Sold Listing Services, which is all the real estate focused stuff. So listing photos, drone, 3D tours, anything a real estate agent would need. And then the other brand is Aspects and Angles Photography, which is pretty much everything that's not related to real estate. So sports, corporate events, really anything that would fall under that umbrella. And as far as the last year has gone, working, with the Supernovas directly has been, it's been a huge privilege. I mean, it really has to be part of something that the first of something is huge. It's huge. And being trusted to, capture, moments both on the court and behind the scenes. It's been a lot of fun, and they're such a great organization to work with. I've worked with a number of different organizations, and they are definitely one that are like, hey, you came recommended, we looked at your work, we love what we see, go forth and conquer. And they kind of just let the creatives be creative. And I think when an organization does that, only positive things can come from that. So, I mean, of course, there's certain shots that they know that they need, and they communicate that accordingly. But other than that, they just kind of let you do your thing, and which is awesome and very much appreciated, because, I think, as any photographer or videographer would say, when they're not put into a box, that's kind of when the real special moments happen. And so, yeah, throughout the season, being able to capture that and watch, the players interact, like you said, with the fans, and the fans just by themselves, were incredible to photograph. And interact with.
I was telling people, one of the things that I really loved about the Supernovas, my daughter was in volleyball, but I don't believe we played a lot near the CHI or at the CHI. But it felt like every time it was on a weekend and I was down there was tournaments happen next door.
Yeah.
And then boom, those kids come over.
Oh, yeah.
And one of the moments that like hits hard for me is when you see these young kids. And of course, for the tournaments that are here, they're traveling in, right? And you get some Minnesota kids there. And I think I don't remember who we were playing, but I know that between the two teams, there was 5 athletes that were from Minnesota.
Yeah.
And listen to these kids talk is like stuff of going, man, is this what it was like a long time ago when people were really that hard into football? Like, we're into football.
Sure. Yeah.
But once they get to the, like, what they consider pro or NFL or even some colleges, we don't really care where they're from or
Sure.
think, at least I don't.
Sure.
I mean, I give credit to Texas and
Of course.
Georgia,
Yeah,
but seeing these kids go, oh my God, they're from Minnesota, from this small town, and they're like, that's just like 30 miles away. And you're like, you're capturing, sitting back and just hearing the moments happen. The games, live action, working alongside, obviously, Hurrdat Sports was
Yep.
a big part of it.
Oh, yeah.
It's got to be one of those where you guys just have this creative moment where we know we're all going to get something good and we're going to put it together. And I think what I love even about Hurrdat is that creativity that you've gotten with the Supernovas is what they prevail for us as well here.
Yeah,
I
of
mean,
course.
at no time have I ever felt my hands pulled back or I had Brandon on just the other episode, my producer, because he was a part of that Supernovas. And just seeing the opportunity that these teams locally are providing to you guys. Obviously, you're a part of the Bellevue University. I do their esports with
right.
David and them, and then
Yep.
you went and took pictures of it, and like the connections that you get with different people. It's got to be one of the favorite things when you know that it's all about creativity and it ain't about the name across your chest, the name across the back. What is that like for you when you go into these venues? Because I could tell you, I did my first state basketball this year as Wired Access, and I have my own credentials, not Hurrdat Sports. It's just Wired Access, and I kind of felt like a fish in water my first time. I just did. I really didn't. I talked to a couple people, but I don't really know a lot of the media, or the ones that I do, they're so busy I don't bother them. I'm like, I'm not going to bother them. Like, what is that like for you to be around all this creativity? And at the end of the day, it's for the sport that you're covering.
Yeah. I draw energy from those environments. Of course I'm focused on, getting certain shots and identifying, certain moments that I want to capture. And, as any photographer or videographer knows, that stuff can happen in the kind of a split second, and, you got to be in the right
You
place
either
at the
got
right-
it or you didn't.
You got to be in the right. Hopefully your focus hit just right, like you wanted it to. But yeah, being around all of those different outlets at different levels is it can be a little overwhelming, especially for anyone especially if it's like your first time out. In fact, even with the Supernovas, there were a number of newer photographers, just freelancers who were there shooting like their very first professional sporting event. And they would come over to us at the Supernovas media table, and just they're what I was 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Just asking questions. Hey, this is my first time, and what are other rules we have to follow. It's just like all the cool thing is that I love though about the creative world, and at least and I'm sure people have different experiences across the board, but it's always been a very welcoming environment. Like I've never walked into any sporting event where there's multiple media outlets and there was like someone who wasn't willing to help you out or answer a question or something like that.
Yeah.
I mean, and I've shot, like when I shot for Steven Nelson when he fought on the Spence Crawford card last year. That was my first opportunity to shoot, at a Showtime pay-per-view level event, and when you go to something like that, it's hundreds and hundreds of media everywhere.
What do you remember, like, even just walking into the venue? Like, what's going through your mind? Obviously, because a game plan has to be there, right?
Yeah.
I mean, because I could tell you shortly after that,
Yeah.
just a couple months ago, I went out of my realm, and I actually covered boxing.
Yeah.
A live event.
Yep.
And Steven Nelson was there, and they were like, "Hey, do you want to interview him?"
That's right.
In front of like 3,000. I'm like, yeah. And then all of a sudden we're going, the mic cuts off, and I'm going, and people are all, "Give him your mic." And I'm like, it's Bull's mic. But it's like once it's live, dude, I'm good to go. But that jitters of going, man, this is bigger than what I ever thought I could do or would do.
Yeah.
And I'm well out of my thoughts. And I mean, I know boxing, but I don't know boxing.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. That particular event was, it was interesting because, I do a lot of work for B&B Sports Academy out of North Omaha. And so I've had, over the last several years, I've gotten to know Steven really well, and really the whole family there at B&B. And so I had already spent a lot of time around kind of that whole camp. And they've really welcomed me into kind of that circle. And I've shot for a number of different fighters out of B&B. And so that took a little bit of the pressure off when I went out to Vegas, and because I went out to Colorado to their camp and shot some stuff with Steven there, and then went to Vegas, obviously the week of the.
So when you were in Colorado,
yeah,
is Showtime there also capturing a little bit of clips?
Oh, they weren't there the day that I was there, but oh, absolutely, like
that's what I thought. Yeah, you see all that pre-show.
Yeah, for sure. They and the Showtime folks, shout out to them. They were all super, super nice. Because I got to spend some time with them in Vegas, kind of behind the scenes. But yeah, they spent a lot of time at a number of different points throughout that whole camp, doing interviews and just documenting the whole thing. And but yeah, when I got to Vegas, like back to your original questions about, is there a game plan? Is there? It's I know the things that Steven wants to capture, but Steven's also the kind of guy who's just like, hey, do your thing. That's why you're here. Do your thing. But there's still that. I
don't want to mess up.
Yeah, there's still that element of like, wow,
I don't want
to
catch a left hook.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, and he, yeah, exactly. But yeah, no, but it was awesome. It was incredible watching, all the media stuff leading up to the fight, the weigh-ins and the press conference, and then, getting to take photos of Steven back in the locker room. Really the whole kind of Team Crawford's back there, and the whole camp, and watching him, kind of get ready, and then the big moment, heading out into T-Mobile Arena, under the bright lights, and being the guy that got to go with him to go and sit, be ringside and photograph his fight. And I mean, it's a huge privilege. It really, really is. Because when you look around and you think, like, and you see, like, there are literally like hundreds of photographers here, being lucky enough to be tapped by someone at his level to say, hey, I want you to come and capture this important moment in my career. I mean, it's an incredible honor. And there were certainly moments where I had to pinch myself and be like, wow, this is awesome. And I'll tell any photographer, that's fun. Like being under the bright lights and whatever, that's awesome. For me personally, I love capturing a lot of the behind the scenes, in the gym type of stuff. Cause that's like, and obviously, and I'll just say boxing specifically, like watching Steven and some of the other fighters, like their level of dedication to their craft is just, it's indescribable. I mean, to see them in the gym working out and capturing a lot of that is just, you see
you're sweating while they're sweating.
Oh yeah, you see, absolutely. You see getting to see the the work before the work.
Yeah.
It goes to show why, B&B specifically turns out incredible talent.
So you get into T-Mobile and you're with the entourage and you're walking in.
Yep.
What are you thinking when you're seeing the fans? I mean, because there's so much yelling going on.
Yeah.
You don't know what moment you're in.
Yeah. Well, and Steven specifically he's known, aside from his talents in the ring, he's known for a lot of his ring walk attire. And he was dressed up as Iron Man coming in. He had the mask, the whole deal. So it was cool to see the fans' reaction to that because it was their first time seeing it. And he walked out right to the entrance of the walkway and he pressed a little button on his helmet. Mask went down. Mask went down, and he made his ring walk. And I was walking backwards obviously because I knew I needed to get a shot of him. Being flanked by security.
See, and you got to be careful knowing what's around your surroundings.
And
it's dark. It's dark behind you.
Right.
I have to say it because I was doing a game because I'm a fan interaction guy for the Omaha Beef, thanks to Hurrdat Sports for hooking that up. And then I also do the halftime interview with the coach and do their watch parties. And I'm sitting there watching something. I go to back up. There's a photographer here, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like feeling bad running into it. That's got to be on your mind. I mean, you're carrying those cameras. If you don't know the price of a camera, it's more than a diamond ring. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah, it's a lot. But and you're right. You have to keep your head on the swivel for sure. So it's a lot of walking backwards, shooting, quickly turn, see what's behind me, keep going. And then luckily there's a spot there at ringside where I could just sit and shoot the fight. But yeah, that was incredible. And there's a lot of the same feelings with shooting, the Supernovas. It was, getting to see, especially like the first game,
So I had Kyle on, one of the head guys here for Hurrdat Sports, and what he told me he had like 700 gigabytes of just between film, photos to make a 1.5-minute video. And I'm just like, because they had like, I think 6 video and 9 stills, and it's just Bill though.
Yeah.
Right. It's just Bill's out there.
Right.
How does that kind of like, how are you able to, I just don't know how you can find everything that you want to find. Cause I just got, for my first time with doing the beef thing, I brought on an intern.
Yep.
So they're recording on the side, so I get every play, so I can kind of give multiple views of the play that I want to show and highlight or whatever I do. But it's not easy alone. What?
Yeah. Well, thankfully, it was, so there's 3 of us.
Okay.
The Nova's media team there's 2 photographers, me, Bonnie, and then the videographer, Trev. And the 3 of us, we really worked closely together the whole season. So there would be a kind of a moment before each match where we kind of huddle, and Bonnie might say, "Hey, I'm gonna shoot from up top to start out for the first set. Do you want to take the bottom?" And we would.
You mean like when I caught you going up the stairs?
That's right. That's exactly right. That's right. And, but so we there was never like a set in stone plan.
I got you.
But there was always a general awareness of kind of where we all were. So that it helped a lot to have 3 different perspectives because we all have our own styles. But it was cool though, and I know the Supernovas really appreciated having those different perspectives because, like with many sporting events, they have to be able to turn out photos throughout, in game. So we would shoot, run back to our laptops, dump our cards, edit, do everything we needed to do for a couple key photos, upload them, card back in camera, run back out. So that's what we were doing.
See, these are parts like I mean, I could tell you, I've caught even my own producer out there multiple times. And I mean, he could be up on a stairwell just amongst the fans, but they don't know.
Yeah.
And like just the thought of going there, running down, putting something away. And I've seen it at high school games, like when the local news comes, they're out there, but then when they're not, they're back behind
behind
the stadium or the seats and all that. And it's just like, and I could tell you, like for basketball, I'm trying to do live. So I'll record.
Yep.
Then I'll try to throw up in Twitter or X, is whatever you want to call it.
Right.
Just ain't uploaded quick enough. So I'm sitting there going, God. And it's hard by yourself.
Yeah.
Obviously, you got quicker ways. You've learned tendencies throughout the process.
Oh, for sure.
What is your best aspect that you think that you've learned to be the quick turnaround, to get the results quicker for yourself? What do you think has been your best attribute that you figured out?
I would say, and this probably isn't a very exciting answer, but I mean, it's just creating systems for yourself. You know, when you're in the heat of the moment, you know, for example, like, you know, at the end of the kind of the final four,
Yeah.
you know, you wanted to get that key shot of the team huddled to get, you know, group photo, you know, screaming at the camera, they're excited, whatever. You know, I know that shot I needed to shoot that. The amount of time between shooting that shot and getting it uploaded over to the PVF's network, I mean, it was a matter of just a couple of minutes. So, you know, all the preparation kind of leads up to that moment.
I
So
gotcha.
creating your systems and being comfortable with, I mean, even just, you know, how to work your camera, how to work your whatever systems you're using to edit, you know, being proficient with putting in the metadata for everything before you upload it, like all those things, doing that over and over and over again kind of prepares you for those moments of getting the shot that you know the league needs and then getting it uploaded. So and I guess, you know, even, you know, at a higher level, I think that the same thought process applies to really any creative who's getting into, you know, photography or videography. Is you got to go shoot. You got to shoot. You just got to get out there.
Yeah.
And you gotta spend time learning the craft. You know, the amount of time that I spent by myself walking around in the woods, like learning how to use my camera years and years ago, like after my day job, going out and you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
you know, I think some people forget, like, you know, and I think that can be applied to anything. When you see any type of level of success, sometimes people forget, like, there was a lot of grinding,
There
a lot of learning before before, you know, you had the opportunity to have access to be able to do those types of things. And so whenever like an up and coming photographer is like, hey, you know, how can I get into this? How can I
time.
you know, it's just like, you just got to go shoot. And I know that's not like the most exciting thing, but it's like, you just have to go shoot and learn what you don't know and learn how
Get
to.
comfortable with that finger, right? I
Yeah,
mean, because
for
you're probably
sure.
sitting there. Do I want that one?
Oh,
No. But
The
instead, you're like,
I mean, early on, like the amount of time, and I know photographers and videographers can relate to this. You know, the amount of time I spent just photographing like a stationary object in my house just to learn about like depth of field and lighting. And I mean, it's like, it's not glamorous, you know, but it's those times where I really learned I laid the foundation of eventually what would grow to learning different types of photography, and all of those lessons that I learned spending all that time by myself just shooting or reaching out to people like, hey, you know, no charge, I just want to come out and like photograph like a family reunion or something, you know. Again, that's just like a, you know, early on, um, getting used to interacting with people on a shoot and
make them feel comfortable.
yeah, for sure. And you know, getting, you know, what do you like shooting? Is it more candid stuff? Is it more pose stuff? And so I spent a lot of time just going out with like nieces and nephews and taking photos of them, or
Okay.
just family events, just stuff. And again, that was like early on, but those were such important moments of learning the craft. You know, and all of that stuff contributes to now, fast forward however many years later, you know, now I'm incredibly, when I pick up my camera, like that's, I'm where I need to be.
That's an attachment.
You know, I'm
When-
where I need to be.
When you think to back, do you even remember what brought you to photography?
Yeah, skateboarding. So growing up, I grew up in a military family, so I lived all over the world. And when I lived in Germany, um, seventh, eighth, and ninth grade, you know, my friends and I saw my friends skateboarding, and as it goes, you know, you end up doing what your friends are doing. And fell in love with the sport and did it for quite some time, and was awesome because I got to skateboard like all over Europe and do all this really cool stuff. And then of course skated a lot when I came back to the States. And one thing that was always commonplace was we always had a camera with us.
Okay.
And that was as a teenager. And of course, I'm not going to sit here and say like, oh, I knew then I would be doing this now. But it was one of those things where I really enjoyed, taking photos and filming my friends doing, skating. And so at that point, I think I kind of got the bug a little bit, and so there was always an element. So from that point forward, I always had a camera with me. But after the kind of life of skateboarding ended for me, it was more of just hobby photography, nothing crazy. I worked a normal corporate job, all throughout my 20s, and it was towards, and it was good experience. I kind of went I guess what you consider a traditional path, but it was, I went to college full time at night, worked full time during the day.
Okay.
Did
But
that.
what was your degree in?
So I have a bachelor's degree in leadership and a master's degree in organizational performance.
So pretty close to photography, but not even close. As many do.
Well, that's the thing is that's another thing that I tell a lot of people who ask me like how to get into things. It's like everyone's journey is different.
Yeah.
There are some people who they knew in 8th grade that they were going to be a photographer.
Yes.
And that's all they did. That's all they've done their whole life. And that's amazing. For me, it wasn't the case. I like I said, college full time at night, working full time during the day in a corporate setting, did really well in that world. But then, towards the last few years is when I, really started to kind of take photography a little bit more seriously. And it was kind of at that point when people started asking me more like in the real estate world, hey, are you available for hire to shoot some of our houses? And my wife, she's a real estate agent.
Ooh.
And
combo.
Yeah. And she followed the same path as I did. She has a master's in cybersecurity, right? Both from Bellevue University, by the way. So yeah, she did the same thing. We both did the corporate life, and because the nature of her work, she worked with the Department of Defense for a number of years. She couldn't take that work home with her, so she started to look for,
your conversations are. I mean, you could say, "Hey, how was your day?" But that's about as far as it going, either good or bad. And I say that because my brother still does that to this day.
There you go.
But he does say, if I call you and hang up, just know. Just know. That's all. I can't say nothing. I'm just calling.
Oh my gosh. Well, I have her to thank though, because I used to practice on her houses.
Yeah.
She used to take her own photos, and I used to just go in and practice and do my own thing. And then some of the agents that she worked with started asking her, hey, who does your photos? Are they available for hire? And that's when it started to click, like, hey, I could actually turn this into a business. And that's when I started Get It Sold listing services back in 2017, I think. And fast forward to now, I've photographed over 5,000 houses.
Ooh.
Worth over $2 billion worth of real estate. And so that's still a huge part of my day-to-day business. Now, it's kind of funny how it works. From Get It Sold listing services, naturally people are like, hey, do you do family photos as well? Do you do birthday parties? Do you do corporate events? Do you do senior photos?
Weddings.
And the weddings. And that's when it started to branch off. And I was like, well, it doesn't make sense to do a wedding under Get It Sold listing services. It doesn't really make sense. So I'm like, well, let me create a different brand and kind of have it different. But yeah, so
two brands, two different styles, but all one guy behind the camera.
Yep, it's just me. Yeah, for sure. And it's been awesome. I mean, the fact that I get to do what I love every day is crazy, because I know a lot of people don't have that opportunity and don't have that privilege, and that's never lost on me. I mean, leaving the corporate world that's another question I get a lot is, how did you know it was time? Were you scared? Were you whatever? And it's like, because I mean, I'll be honest with you. I mean, we're talking, when I say corporate, I mean like 6-figure gig.
Yeah.
The big title, the big office, the fancy suits, everything that like, a lot of society views as like, that's
the life.
that's
the
the life, and, luckily, my wife had taken the leap of leaving the government and going real estate full time a few years before I took the leap. And she was telling me years before I left, like, dude, just leave,
do it,
just do it, man, just do it, But I mean, there's a part of you that's like, oh man, like, I went to college for all this stuff. I've put in all this time, and I've worked up the ladder or whatever. But then you get to the point where you're just like, you have this opportunity in front of you to be able to. It's not even about like being your own boss. It's like being in charge of your own time is like.
Well, that the product that comes out is the results of the hard work you've done.
Yeah.
I get told all the time where people are like, man, you're just so busy. I'm like, give me an opportunity to tell you no, because I may be busy doing DJ, lawns, podcasts, sports videos, but I put everything in there for a reason because none of it's work.
Yeah.
It's I mean, when it's the lawns, I understand it can get hot, it can get tiring sometimes, but it's just a lawnmower and you're just out there with I got a couple of my boys that have been with me for 5-6 years.
Yeah.
They get to do their aspirations. One's an umpire.
Yeah.
Another one just made the CB Captains Football Club that I just interviewed their thing. He just did the tryouts.
Awesome.
And so it's making those connections. This here, I obviously did radio for a short time. Got down on myself, and then they were like, dude, you need to put it back, brought it back together, did 15 episodes all by myself and with my co-host at the time, Brian, who gave me the opportunity. And then I presented it to Hurrdat, and here I am year 2 with them. And it's just like the creativeness continues to go. I'm not stuck on, okay, we're all Husker players or we're all baseball players or we're all basketball players. I love getting the stories of through the journey for everybody, because like you said, the journey's not the same, but maybe someone will see, man, should I make this jump from corporate world and go do what I do?
Yeah.
I've known a teacher that has left teaching to go do photography. And now I think he's all the way in California because he's like, I'm going to go make it. And I'm like, I've seen, a drummer from Papillion is now a part of Connor Smith, who's from Nashville, and he's doing big tours. And it's like, it's a risk. For me, I had to wait till my wife got a job where I wasn't covering our insurance.
Yeah.
Once she did that, I was able to do anything and everything where I don't have to. I think when you can release some of those responsibilities, and they ain't like releasing them in a bad way, but the insurance was always on me.
Yeah.
Now it's not. And now it's like, okay, I'll go find ways to make it work. And when you think of all your changes from the corporate world, what do you think was your hardest thing to overcome, and one that maybe even scared you more than anything, even with having a supportive wife?
Yeah. And, I think, I think there's always, I'm human like anyone else. I think there's always an element of, at least early on, there's that element of like, this has to work.
Yeah.
This has to work. So there's a little bit of, self-imposed pressure there.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't spend a whole lot of time thinking like, oh, I've got 2 degrees, I've got all this experience. If this doesn't work, I can just go back. Because I think that's kind of a, I don't think it's wrong to think like that, but for me, I was like, I don't want to think this is my path. This is my new path. I don't want to think about my backup plan. I need to make. I'm going to make this work. I'm going to make this work. And so that was always my mindset. At least as much as it could make it my mindset. But as far as fear, I think it was just, I think as any new business owner has is, you start thinking, you should think about like, how am I going to get my brand out there? How am I going to build a client base? Thankfully, I had already done as much of that as physically possible.
The groundwork,
on the side at nights and weekends. So when I made the decision to leave the corporate world, I had a really strong foundation. So there wasn't a whole lot of fear there, because I knew, because it had reached a point where like, I would leave work and it would just be shooting all evening, shooting all weekend. It reached a point where I'm like, I have to make a decision on what I want to do, because there's just not enough time in the day. You know, there just isn't.
For what you want to do, you either got to give it more time or
Yeah.
less time, and you decide to make more time.
Yeah, and the other thing is, and I know you didn't ask this, but one thing I get asked a lot is, how do you deal with the noise from other people, especially when you may be taking a non-traditional path of going to work for yourself. Because a lot of times in society we're really more trained and taught to how to work for other people and how to work for organizations, not necessarily work for yourself. And my biggest piece of advice, so I published a book in 2019 called Stop Listening. And it's literally about my journey through my 20s into my early 30s. And between my wife and I, we stopped listening to other people's unsolicited advice. We stopped. That's literally why it's called Stop Listening. Because
so you're telling me if they haven't lived it, you got to be careful what you listen to.
Yeah, absolutely.
I say that all the time. Like,
for sure.
I don't want to give you an example if I don't have something I've done to back it up.
Absolutely. And that's the thing is, like, for example, early 20s, my wife and I think we bought our first house when we were, I don't know, I think we were 20 or 21. And shortly after that, we decided, we didn't know obviously what the future will hold, but we were like, we want to make it so that we can have a certain level of freedom in the future to do whatever we want. So we started investing in real estate, and we started acquiring properties, remodeling them, renting them out. And we had so many people, friends, family, everybody. Oh, that's so risky. Don't do that. People will destroy your house. That's such a bad idea. But we spent a lot of time learning that business.
Yeah.
And how to control as much of the controllables as possible. And, now we own 15 houses, and I'm so thankful
that you didn't follow what was being.
Yeah, that I didn't listen to a lot of advice. And I'm not saying there's not value in
providing it,
but it's always, and anybody who has any level of success in anything can attest to this. It's always, most of the advice you get is usually unsolicited. It's usually from people who haven't kind of gone on the same journey that you have. It's just outside perspectives of giving you a piece of advice that you didn't really ask for.
Yeah.
It's just being honest, So, that was learning to what to listen to and what not to listen to was probably one of the best lessons and just mindsets to be in early on. And I can honestly say it transformed my entire life, because between my wife and I, we got to a point where now we can kind of do whatever we want.
Yeah.
And that's,
not many people have that option.
No.
When you think of just even going to your photography and taking that leap of faith.
Yep.
Do you remember your first thought that it wasn't going to work, or when that happened and how you overcame it?
Yeah, I would say there was a number of, so I'll use real estate for an example. I had there was a week where I had, I don't know, probably had, in that week I had like 4 or 5 real estate agents cancel. And it wasn't anything I did. But it's the real estate world.
Yes.
They're sellers. One got cold feet, decided they didn't want to list anymore. Another one was like, we want to, we'll list later. We want to remodel something first before we list it because we want to get more money. Another one was just like, let's reschedule for a few months down the road. And that still happens to today. But early on, I was like, oh, I got all these appointments on my calendar. I'm so excited. And then they all canceled. And I was like, I think that was, for a moment there, I was just like, oh my gosh, like, because now I shoot, fast forward to today, I shoot 3 or 4 houses a day most days.
Yeah.
And it was pretty similar in the beginning. The business has always been it's grown a lot for me, but it's always been fairly steady. But early on, I'm excited that I have all this business. I'm like, hey, I left the corporate world. I'm on my own. My calendar's full, whatever. And I just experienced this pocket of this week or week and a half where like all these people canceled. And yeah, you're kind of, the fear kind of flashes before your eyes, like, oh, that's lost revenue. Like, oh my gosh, like what am I like if that happens over and over and over again, all of a sudden you have no revenue. My
speaking to the wife on that, how do you remember? Because I could tell you, like, I hate when I'm not out working.
Sure.
Because I know the money ain't coming in.
Right,
like if
right.
I'm not mowing lawns, I'm not making money.
Right.
So that's one of the biggest things that I'm always like, rain.
Yeah.
I'm like, luckily I have a part-time job that I can go to. Right.
Yeah.
So I have a back pocket.
Yeah.
Well, having those back pockets.
Yeah. Well, thankfully, I having a very supportive partner and one who is in the real estate business. She was like, Matt, she's like, that's real estate. Like this stuff's gonna happen. I was like, look at your schedule next week. It's full. Look at the schedule after that. It's full. After that, it's full. Like you're gonna have these times. And what's funny is now, if I have gaps in my schedule, I'm like, cool. Like
give me a couple more.
Give me a couple days to catch up on edit, because there's always editing to catch up on. Always. There's always projects in the queue. So yeah, it is kind of funny how you wish you would have appreciated some of those slower times before versus now, where if you have a little bit of a gap, I'm like, oh cool, I get to like sleep a little bit.
See, and that's probably do you find it really, like, for me, my hardest thing is getting content out. This phone is packed full of content. But getting it out to where it's coming back and receptive, and being receptive is like one thing I have to find ways to do better and be better at.
I post at a fairly disgustingly high pace. I'm always laugh thinking like, man, people who follow me on Instagram must be like, Jesus, this dude work, or does he just post? Because I'm always posting, because a lot of my shoots that I do, I always have those photos, saved, a select few saved on my phone. And I post, you can go on my Instagram and look, you can see the timestamps. Like I post a lot. And that's, I think it's worked in my favor. I've got, a lot of folks. I've had a lot of business come through my Instagram. But I post a lot of the houses that I shoot. I put on Facebook and on Instagram, and those have been like my two major things. I've just made it a point to post and not worry about if someone's going to be annoyed. Like if you're annoyed that I posted something too often, just unfollow me. It's all good.
Make it simple.
Yeah,
Make it easy.
all good. So I just there's a lot of us out there. There's a lot of photographers, and you have to figure out how to cut through, a lot of the noise and make yourself stand out. And of course, at the end of the day, that comes, in my opinion, it's the quality of your work, not necessarily how often you post. But, I don't know. I stopped worrying about whether people thought I was posting too much, and I just post.
The only one I got to worry about that is the wife, but where she's like, are you sure? And I'm like, trust me, I got to get this done.
Yep.
When you think of all the things that you've done so far, what's your biggest surreal moment?
Biggest surreal moment was probably, biggest surreal moment, probably seeing Eminem in person.
I was gonna get to that, and you straight killed it. Yes, sir.
I certainly did not. I won't say that I spent any bit of important amount of time with him or anything. It was literally. It's kind of, actually, I'm glad we're talking about this. Kind of goes back to that point where, moments happen, and sometimes you just have to be in the right moment. Well, I was at a different part in the arena before, Crawford and Eminem were getting ready to make their ring walk. Crawford's photographer, his name's Levy. Shout out to you, Levy. He is a really good dude and crazy talented. He was already, where he needed to be.
Yeah.
Since he's Crawford's photographer, he, obviously going to capture all of Crawford's stuff like I did with Steven. So I was off to the side in the back, and I was actually editing. I was in Team Crawford's locker room editing Steven's photos from his fight earlier on the card, because we talked about got to get the photos out,
gotta
right?
Get
them out. So I'm just in the corner, like just editing, and eventually they're like, "Hey, we got to clear the locker room," and I'm like, this must be like the moment. So we
Did you know he was coming before people knew? I had the feeling, of course, after the Twitter post and all that.
I found out a few minutes before it happened.
Okay.
They kept it pretty quiet. So I had stepped out outside of, you picture like, the locker room door.
Yeah.
And I just said, you know what, I'll, before the fight, I'm just going to post up in this corner and just, see what happens. I mean, they have to come out of this way. So I know they're going to come this way. Doors opened. There he is. there's Crawford, there's Eminem. And I just crouched down in the corner. I was allowed to I had all the proper credentials and stuff, so I was allowed to be back there. But, that's such a moment where I'm like, you don't want to be in the way. So I just kind of made myself small in the corner, shot a couple of photos, and it was like probably some of the first photos of them publicly together before the ring walk.
Let's go, Bill.
Yeah.
Go.
And there he was. And there and there was Eminem, and that was, and it, as I'm 36. I grew up on Eminem. He's the GOAT, so seeing him, even just being in this small back hallway standing across from him, I mean, it was incredible. That's one.
So there was no Vegas hangout after the fate.
I'm sure there was. If there was, I wasn't invited.
Okay, photographer not invited.
That's right. If there was, I was not invited. But no, but that was probably the most surreal moment, because you're like, just being trusted to even be in the presence of not only people like Steven and Crawford and other fighters on that card that are at the top of their game and are world champions, but also being around, people, someone like Eminem, that was.
Well, I mean, you just had Jason Derulo in Omaha.
That's right. Nice guy.
Yeah.
Nice guy. Very nice guy.
And that had to go just as well, where you're like,
that was really cool. Yeah, that was a really cool experience getting to see him. It was funny, like all throughout the season. And for those listening, for those who don't know, Jason Derulo is obviously a co-owner of the Supernovas, and we were all kind of hoping all season long, like, oh, when are we going to see him?
Well, yeah, people. I mean, first game they're like, Kendall, he's coming, right? And I'm like, and then they're like, they see someone that might represent him on the floor, and they're like, is that him? And I'm like, no, that's not him.
Yeah, So when we heard that he was going to be there that night, and we assumed, championship, he'll be there.
Got to be there.
When we got the word that he was pulling up, and there was a bunch of people from Hurrdat too, they got a ton of photos and videos of his arrival, and I mean, it was really cool. It was really cool to take those photos, and because
he went to the Let It Fly afterwards with everybody.
He did, yeah, and I did go to that after party.
I got my boy Eric Guerrero. Shout out to Eric.
What's up, man? Of course, yeah, Eric's a good dude.
And he was like, I had to go. I mean, he's in town.
Yeah, it was awesome. It was really, really cool. And what was really special, I think, is getting to go into the locker room afterwards. When they're still just celebrating back there and champagne's flying, and got some really good champagne photos, which was pretty cool. But him coming back there and just you've got this global superstar there, and
he's
just back there, he's
Nebraskan at that time,
exactly right. Yes, exactly right. He was just back there, and he said a few some motivational words to the team, and we took some group photos, and that was that. That was a very cool experience. Sometimes I want, where will my camera take me next?
That's what we're ready to see next. But I appreciate you guys tuning in, Wired Axcess. I appreciate Matthew Bills of Aspects and Angles Photography. And then what's your real estate one?
Get It Sold Listing Services.
Get It Sold Listing. Make sure to check him out. Follow, like, whatever. Check out his Instagram. It's all real. It's all right there for you. And remember, if you like this episode, just hit the thumbs up, share it, tweet it, whatever. We appreciate you guys, and we can't do this without Hurrdat Sports production. We appreciate you. See you next show.